Let's talk about Every Dog Has His Day, the second episode of the second season of Teen Titans. An episode which, right out the gate, I will confess I'm not the biggest fan of. It's far from my favorite episode of the series. Which is not to say that it necessarily does anything wrong, it's just, I feel that compared to the relatively strong showing from pretty much every episode of this show, this one is near the bottom of the barrel. It's not as good as its fellow Teen Titans episodes, but it's still good TV, if that makes sense. The episode starts out with Beast Boy looking for something to do, but the others are all preoccupied. Even Robin doesn't want his help with sparring, which I'll talk about why that's kind of goofy later in this review. But point is, Beast Boy must find some way to occupy himself, but he can't really. He's super bored, so he ends up wandering out into town. And in a bid to impress some girls, he transforms himself into a green beagle with slightly darker green spots, but they think it's weird that he's green, and so they shoo him away, and he ends up bumping into another green dog that's the exact same size, with the exact same build, but is pure green without the spots. It turns out that this dog is an alien dog who escaped his master's ship and landed on Earth, and his master now comes looking for him and ends up scooping up Beast Boy instead. This leaves behind Beast Boy's communicator, implying that he somehow dropped it while in dog form, which begs the question of where his clothes and his equipment go when he's in dog form, which is a question I do not want to dwell on, so I'm going to go ahead and try to repress that as quickly as possible. The alien puts him in a collar which can apply electric shocks and changes size when Beast Boy changes size. We actually see Beast Boy run through the gamut of most of the animals he can transform into, but once we see the fish, once we see the mostly tubular creature, the thing ends up in their midsection rather than on their neck, since they don't really have a true neck. I'm just left thinking, turn into a snake. Turn into a snake. Turn into a snake. And while we don't see how he eventually escapes this color, I'm assuming that he did so by turning into a snake, because he does escape it later. But then again, we do see later that the alien dog can basically turn very briefly into a liquid, which can then move itself through the air in a limited capacity, so if the collar couldn't hold him, then I'm surprised that Beast Boy was able to get out of it in the first place. It's really weird, and I want to know how he did it, is my point. I'm a logical thinker, you guys know that at this point. You can see why this bothers me. Point is, there is a mix-up. This alien now thinks that Beast Boy is his dog, very briefly until Beast Boy turns back into Beast Boy, at which point he thinks that Beast Boy is a better dog and decides to keep him. Meanwhile, the other Titans find the green alien dog and assume that it's Beast Boy, that he's somehow locked in a beast form. He takes a particular liking to Raven. Don't blame me there, buddy. Which is a detail that they even use to help trap him later when they realize that he's not Beast Boy, but that he might be able to help them figure out where Beast Boy is. Through, like, forensics and whatever. They don't expect him to be able to talk, because he's a dog, which is why they are particularly surprised when he starts talking to them. He helps them to find his master's ship. They bring it down, and his master comes out to fight them. Wait, hold on a second. Is his ship a TARDIS or something? How did he fit in there? How did that giant room that we saw earlier fit in there? Whatever, moving on. The Titans defeat this guy, and his dog puts the collar on him, and he decides out of nowhere to be the dog for a while. Well, his dog plays the master, which has some interesting implications for this pair that I will also talk about in a minute. And let's just say I'm expecting the yellow dollar sign on this video, and leave it at that for now. And the episode ends with Beast Boy actually saying that he is not in the mood to hang out with his friends anymore because he's had too much attention for one day. There's a lot of good in this episode. Like, there's a scene very early on where we get to see a rare instance of Raven acting cute and girly, which of course makes this episode worth it all on its own. And it's not as if the other Titans are hating on Beast Boy or anything, it's just they are doing other things that don't require him being around and want to do those things themselves. Though I do find it kind of ironic that in the same episode in which Robin turned down a sparring partner who can turn into a giant animal, he ended up having to fight a giant alien. I just think it would have been neat if Beast Boy had, like, suggested sparring against Robin in his T-Rex form, and Robin had said, I don't need you to do that, and then later it turned out that it might have been beneficial, it might have been a funny callback. But the point is, it's not that they don't like Beast Boy, it's just that they weren't in any position to spend time with him at that particular moment, which I'm sure is a thing that's happened before. Even best friends, even the closest of family, do not spend every waking moment together. That's just not how humans work. Right, Dragonstorm? See, this guy gets it. So I imagine this is probably a situation that one or more of the Titans find themselves in. Occasionally, it's just, this episode makes it seem like it's a rare occurrence. They pile all this dramatic weight on this exchange between Beast Boy and the other Titans that I feel has to be pretty common between them. I feel like they are making an attempt to work a message into the episode that I just don't feel landed. But end of the day, this episode did turn out to be primarily a comedy episode, and it did that pretty effectively. A lot of the comedy scenes were very well animated, very well executed. The direction was great, like I know there's not really a camera, but the camera angles were good. Like, there's this montage in the middle of the second act where they're chasing the alien dog, and it's really on point with some good visual comedy and some really good animation and really good action sequences. And the running gag of the dog jumping on Raven and licking her face and then running off, even though she clearly doesn't like it, is quite funny until later when you realize that the dog is sentient, which also has some weird implications, but again, I'll talk about all that stuff at the end of this video very briefly. Point is, there's a lot of humor here that lands pretty effectively. There's some decent cuteness, there's some good animation, and that alone makes this episode worth watching. I'm not saying that this episode isn't worth watching or anything. I'm just not entirely sure what the point of this episode was. Was it just meant to be entertaining filler? Fine, it was entertaining as filler, but let it be entertaining filler. Don't try to cram this message that Beast Boy isn't appreciated into this episode that doesn't need it. While the final confrontation between the Titans and this alien was certainly very interesting, with the Titans displaying uses for and combinations of their powers that we don't typically get to see, and Beast Boy even getting a chance to really show off how competent and skilled a fighter he actually is, I feel like the implications of this battle weren't fully explored. The alien, whose name I believe was Soto, if I'm remembering correctly, though I swear they pronounced it Solo several times, acted like a child. He seemed to have the mind of a child if he wasn't literally a child himself. There is a precedent in science fiction for powerful children going out on their own and getting into trouble without anybody realizing at first that they're children. Even the controls on this ship were designed to look like children's learning toys. It makes me wonder if this guy is a child. And if he is, regardless of how durable he is or how strong he is or how much he's acting out, the Teen Titans just beat up a child, and that kind of rubs me the wrong way. Also, and this is just me, I know this isn't what they were going for, but it did stick out to me. When the dog put the collar on Soto and Soto immediately started acting submissive to him, like, apologies for even saying this, but like, I wondered if this was a weird sexual thing between these two fully sentient creatures. If they were like role-playing and they got some gratification out of it or something. Again, I'm sure that that's not what the writers of this episode were going for, but maybe they should have been a little more mindful of how that scene could be taken, is all I'm saying. More seriously, though, I'm kind of wondering if this arrangement was always how things were arranged. The dog is also clearly a sentient creature, which is incidentally why I think it's a little weird that he was jumping on Raven the way that he was. The fact that he's aware of what he's doing and the consequences of them adds sort of an icky undertone to those scenes that are once again something that I do not want to think too much about. But once it's revealed that the dog is sentient and can talk and is seemingly more intelligent than Soto himself is, and has some sort of shape-shifting abilities, and we see that the collar fits Soto as well, and we see that Soto isn't opposed to behaving like the pet in this situation, almost as if he's done so in the past. I'm kind of left wondering if the dog wasn't originally the master over Soto, if he didn't, I don't know, kidnap Soto from his planet or something and decide to keep him as a pet because he's less intelligent. Like, the electric shocks that the collar was able to apply to Beast Boy wouldn't be nearly as painful to a rock creature like Soto. They'd be more like a vibrating collar that you might put on a dog to get their attention. I don't know, I just feel like the Titans allowing the two of them to leave with things the way that they were when they left was short-sighted on the part of the heroes of this show. But even if that's not the case, even if things are exactly as they appeared since the beginning, this means that this alien dog was once in that collar, once trapped in that collar, and had electric shocks applied to him by this collar when he disobeyed, which is abuse. It's animal abuse. And I can't imagine that Beast Boy, who is a vegetarian specifically because he sympathizes so much with the animals he can turn into, would allow that to go on. I can't believe that he would allow that dog to go with Soto again, even if the dog seemed in control now, if there was a chance that the dog might be put back in that situation at a later date. But still, despite all this weird stuff that the episode might inspire you to think about, as it did me, especially if you're someone who's more able to let that stuff go, this is a perfectly entertaining episode, visually, comedically. They even managed to work in some pretty decent examples of the show's offbeat comedy in the final action scene without compromising how good of an action scene it is. If that's all you want out of this episode is just 22 minutes of fun without having to think about it too much, then this episode will probably be especially fun for you. My problem with it is that I think about stuff too much, first of all, and also I can't help but wonder if there was supposed to be some additional purpose to this episode that just didn't come through as well as it was supposed to. I don't know. What did you think about the moral of this episode, Rupert? Now, see, I'm glad you said that, because I never would have thought of that myself. You guys heard that, right? Man, was that easily the most insightful thing that's ever been said on this channel. Anyway, as per usual, I'd like to know, what do you think of this episode of Teen Titans, if you have seen it? Did you notice any of the same odd implications that I did? And if so, how much brain bleach did you need to erase it from your memory? I'm asking for a friend. Let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below, or over on my Discord, link in the description. But either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.